Hey guys, ready to learn some radical stuff about the media industry?
Yeah, we're going to talk about a research project that we think you guys will find cool. We're going to go into a fun and educational talk about how actors' controversies can sometimes impact their film performances.
We'll look at the financial, critical, and audience reception.
We will also be looking at films that you might have seen, like this one, or even this one, and even this one, and see how some of these hold up with a modern audience. Warning, things might get a little rough.
I bet you're wondering, why did we choose this study?
Why should people care?
Why should I not skip this video right now?
Let us explain!
We decided on this topic since we think it's important for everyone to be informed on what might affect film performances when they release. Whether you hate it or love it, celebrities have always been important when it comes to films, and how their behavior affects performance would be interesting to see. We wanted to focus on actors who have controversies, since this would have a larger effect. It is our hope that this information can be used to make decisions such as PR management, production planning, and even audience education.
With this being such an interesting topic, we wanted to see what information already exists.
And well, this is what we found.
First, we wanted to see if there was any information on how audiences felt in the past with regards to celebrities being controversial and their films. We found some information on this topic, a good example of this being Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ. When first released, the film was well received. This changed after a number of incidents with Gibson, including an anti-Semitic rant. Josh Levs wrote an article for CNN detailing how Mel's behavior has tainted the film's legacy.
As for observing films and their reputation over time, it is clear that many older films were forgiven due to their time period, but now modern audiences view these films with modern lenses. For instance, the film Breakfast at Tiffany's is regarded as a Hollywood classic and is beloved by so many, but Mickey Rooney's performance as Mr. Yonioshi has tainted the film, with many finding his performance to be extremely insensitive and racist.
Other films are guilty of this too, such as Disney's very controversial film, Song of the South, which many believe carry racist undertones.
Wow, that does seem like a lot of information, but there were still some things that we wanted to know more about. This brings us to our research.
We conducted this research by using two different methods: survey, content analysis.
First, let's talk about our survey. By using Qualtrics, we created a 17-question survey and distributed it through text, email, and Discord servers. This allowed us to get a total of 117 responses, which is about a 98 response rate.
That's a lot.
Let's talk a bit about our demographics. Oh,
As you guys can see, we had about 42% of our respondents being female, with 35% being male and about 4% being non-binary, third-gendered, or preferred not to say. For ages, we had the majority being between 18 to 24 years old at 59%, 20% being between 25 to 30 years old, 15% being between 31 and 40 years old, and 6% being over the age of 41. About 62% identified themselves as Hispanic or Latino, 16% white, 14% Asian, 3% black, and 6% as other. Lastly, we looked at education. Out of our 117 respondents, 44 had completed at least high school, 30 had an associate degree or equivalent, 35 had bachelor's or equivalent, and 3 had a master's or graduate degree.
After we found out who we were surveying, we wanted to find out what their thoughts on theatrical release films were. We did this by using 3 different survey questions.
As you guys can see, question 6 asked, how interested are you in theatrical release films? We were amazed to find out that the majority of people, a whopping 47%, were moderately to extremely interested. As you guys can see in the graph, the majority of our respondents showed at least a basic level of interest in this. Question 7 allowed us to verify this by asking, how would you watch a newly released film? Again, we found that 47% of people would either watch it in the week of release or whenever they had a chance, with only a few deciding to not watch it in theaters at all. Lastly, we also asked, how many films have you watched in theaters in the last 2 months? Here we did see a bit of a bigger shift, with 21% saying they haven't seen any, but again, the majority have seen at least 1 or 2 films. Well, this gave us a lot of interesting information.
In other words, theaters are still radical. Seriously though, go to a movie theater. Go to a movie theater right now.
So true. We found out that most of you guys would rather see new movies in the theater still.
We had 4 research questions we hope to answer, as well as our own hypothesis for each of them. Don't worry guys, we will go over them and talk about what we found.
That means it's time to go over our data, so prepare for some brain overload.
Research question number 1.
Do controversies surrounding actors have an effect on whether audiences see those upcoming films? Our hypothesis is yes. Their behavior and perception does have an effect on whether audiences see those upcoming films.
We were able to get data on this by looking at our survey and how our recipients responded. First, we wanted to see how our recipients regard actors and their personal lives. Furthermore, we wanted to also know if a celebrity's personal actions affect their reputation. When asked how important would a lead actor or actress be in a deciding factor in whether you see a film in theaters, 44% of our recipients were selected moderately important, interested in seeing how these controversies were regarded in films. When asked how important is it that the cast of a film is free of any controversies, 37% of our recipients selected moderately important. But the overall response to the question was leaning more towards slightly important, showing that the majority of participants felt neutral in regards to how significant it is for controversial actors to star as leads in film, and whether that hindered their decision of viewing that film in theaters. Next, we were interested in looking at how audiences perceive art. Since we were talking about artists, celebrities, performers, etc., and controversies, one of our most anticipated pieces of data was asking the question, can you separate art from the artist? The results were somewhat of a landslide. The majority ended up being 37% of participants had selected somewhat agree. We concluded that even though an artist may do wrong, many felt that it would affect how one views their work, but it also doesn't matter who is in the cast as long as the content is good. This set of questions helped us get a better understanding of how our participants view controversial artists and their content while taking into consideration of them as a person and solely reviewing the content itself.
Research question number 2.
How have modern audiences' views on older films, which involve controversial moments, changed? Hypothesis number 1. Modern audiences view older films that have major controversies more harshly than the audiences of that time. Hypothesis number 2. Classic films carry enough respect and nostalgia to be able to offset any controversy that surrounds said film. With this approach, we decided to create a set of questions regarding films 10 years or older with controversial content, which we then had our recipients rate the following statements. We first wanted to ask if older films are viewed differently by modern audiences. As a result, 30% selected strongly agree. Next, we wanted to see how participants personally felt about older films dealing with controversial content. Correspondingly, we also asked if personal views and opinions had changed as one got older. As for the results, there was a close tie, with 23% selecting neither agree nor disagree, and 24% of participants selecting somewhat agree. After reviewing and analyzing our results, the majority of our respondents agreed with the statements and suggested that their opinions had changed as they got older, agreeing with the statement that if older films are viewed differently by modern audiences.
Research question number 3.
Do films with actors' controversies have an effect on the domestic box office revenue performance of the film? Our hypothesis says, we believe that actors involved in controversies before their newly released films have a negative effect on domestic box office revenue performance. In order to tackle this particular question, we had to get a little bit creative using content analysis. First, we chose 3 sample films, all of which had actors with controversies before their film release. These were Death on the Nile, Don't Worry Darling, and Fantastic Beasts: Secrets of Dumbledore. Next, we used an online database that allowed us to compare the box office of these films with other releases near the same time, having similar genres and budgets. The first sample film we'll be looking at is Death on the Nile, which will be compared to Uncharted. As you guys can see, it underperformed, bringing in only $45 million compared to Uncharted's $148 million. What this means is that Death on the Nile only made around 50% of their budget compared to Uncharted making around 123% of their budget. Our next sample film, Don't Worry Darling, was compared with The Woman King. As you guys can see, it brought in around $45 million compared to The Woman King's $67 million. This means that Don't Worry Darling actually made around 120% of their budget compared to Woman Kings, who made around 130% of their budget. Though this is less of a disparity compared to our last sample, both films still performed pretty poorly in the domestic box office. Our final sample film, Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore, was compared with its direct prequel, The Crimes of Grindelwald. As you guys can see, The Secrets of Dumbledore brought in around $95 million on a massive $200 million budget. This means that it only brought in 50% of what they spent on budget alone. The Crimes of Grindelwald had a similar budget of $200 million, but instead brought in $160 million, which is still less, around only 80% of its budget, but still significantly better than the sequel. By looking at our 3 sample films, we can say that actor controversy at least contributes to lower box office performance.
Research question number 4.
Do controversies surrounding actors have an effect on critical reception of their upcoming films? Our hypothesis says actors' controversies have a negative effect in critical reception of their newly released films, as critics tend to criticize those films harsher than audiences. For this, we decided to use the 3 most popular critic websites, which were Metascore, Rotten Tomatoes, and IMDb. By using these 3 sites, we were able to compare our 3 sample films. Death on the Nile had a Metascore of 52%, a Rotten Tomato score of 62%, and an IMDb rating of 63%. Meanwhile, Don't Worry Darling had a Metascore rating of 48%, a Rotten Tomato rating of 38%, and an IMDb rating of 62%. And finally, Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore had a Metascore of 47%, with a Rotten Tomato score of 46% and an IMDb rating of 42%. As we can see, all 3 sample films performed poorly with critics, with IMDb being their highest rating, which is not surprising as they rely more on audience reception.
We found a ton of interesting stuff during this project.
One thing I found interesting was that when people were asked in a general sense whether an artist affected how they view a film, they answered not important. But when certain individuals were brought up, they contradicted themselves, showing that social norms are a little subjective.
I get that. Tom Hanks can never do anything wrong.
Also, we were really surprised with just how similar a lot of our respondents answered, regardless of age, race, gender, and education. With this showing us just how prevalent social norms have become.
We are just a zebra in a herd.
Amazingly, a lot of our predictions were spot on. The data we collected helped prove this.
I know a lot of you guys are saying like, well, duh, but it's good to verify this with some hard, cold data.
We're so glad we can share our findings with you and hope you have a better understanding about our industry.
Whether you're a general viewer,
Film or TV student,
a professor of a Southern California university teaching here in the Valley,
or an industry professional,
we leave you with these last thoughts. Controversies regarding actors pique our interest and they're fun to hear about. I mean, who doesn't love hearing about these larger-than-life people and their lives? Let's face it, it's very juicy.
But we realize that these can have effects on film performances, movies that hundreds of people helped create. With that, we should keep that in mind, that these movies don't belong just to the actors, but to all of us.
And with that, we wish you guys good luck, stay cool, and stay out of controversies.